Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll start this Kiddushin daf Chav Ches. We are going to begin on Chav Zayin Amud Beis, second line from the bottom. So we were learning that when it came to the din of karka, a person cannot make a shvua, ein nishmoin al karkais. However, there is a concept of gilgal shvua, that once you're required to make a shvua, so then we could also tack on other shvuos as well. And we concluded by saying we see this from the din of a sota, because a woman says amen, amen. What is the purpose of saying it twice? So the reason is because of gilgal shvua, because one of the things that she's testifying is that she did not have tashmish, or she was not secluded and have tashmish while she was in the state of erison, because technically erison is not a reason to make a shvua, because either it's tachasi sheikh, it has to be that it's only nesuin, and even if you want to tell me that she was secluded at erison, and then afterwards the husband performed nesuin, so then in that situation we have the pasuk of Nika Ishma Avoin, so he was not supposed to marry her because that she was considered to be Asur Labal. And therefore, because he did the wrong thing, also says she wouldn't drink sota, may sota because of it. So the only reason why is El Alidei Gilgal. Now, can we compare that to our case? So Ashkan Saita the Isura, I can understand there may be a concept of Gilgal Shvul when it comes to an Isur, like Sota, Mamayin. How do we know when it comes to the dinim of Mamayin? And as we saw before, that generally we don't learn out Mamayin from Isur, or vice versa. So Tanim Rabbi Shmuel Kavachaimer. Actually, we can derive a Kavachaimer. What is that? Ma Saita, as we continue to Chav Ches Amud Aleph. Madach, when it comes to the din of a Saita. Shloi Nitna Hitava Be'ed Echad Megalgalin. So when it comes to a Saita, she's not given over with one witness, says Rashi. Shvua Shalah Be'ed Echad. When it comes to one witness, Kedarina Hasam, Detzar Shnei Edim. You need actually two witnesses, Shiruha Shinistra, that actually saw her secluding herself with this man. And it's learned out from Kavachai, Gzer Shava, Davar from Mamoin. So we're pretty strict over there that you need two witnesses. Nonetheless, Megalgalin, we already established when it comes to Saitas Gilgal Shvua. So Mamoin, when it comes to Dini Mominus, Shenitan Lihitava Be'ed Echad, in that situation, even one witness can force someone to swear, because the pasuk says, Rashi, Lo Yokom Be'ed Echad Be'ish L'chol Av L'chol Chatas L'chol Av L'chol Chatas Enu Kam Elvakam Hu Shvua. Pretty famous drasha that one witness does have the power to force this guy to make a shvua. So Enu Din Shmigagolin. So since we see that we're stricter when it comes to the din of an Eid Echad, when it comes to the din of Mamoin, so therefore we should certainly require Gilgal. So Ashkan Bevadai, I can understand if we're talking about for sure. Says Rashi Shmigagolin Shvua Tainis Bari. If there's certainty, but Davar Shein Chayavan Alav Shvua could go in Karkos. Again, for example, land, which you don't typically make a shua, or shul hoidim mixus. Now, when it comes to being hoidim mixus, if a person says you owe me $100 and he says I agree, I owe you $50, that's a din deraisa. So shemigalgal naisai, you're going to do gilgal there in the schayvul shua mamakamacher if you're chayv in another place, because it's a tainis bari. Safik Benayin, says Rashi, tainis shema. Kun shua sashutbin varisin shecholku. You have these people that divide property or like a partnership or sharecroppers, so you want them to make a shvua. You don't know really if they were honest, but you don't know that they were dishonest. It's a tainis suffix, so maybe in that situation we would not require a shvua. So it says Rashi, you can't compare it to a saita because the whole notion of the shvua is a suffix. We don't know what happened behind closed doors. Says Rashi, the kivan de ikar shvuas mamoin leisa el b'tainis vadai. However, when it comes to the din of a shvua, when it comes to tainis of mamoin, it's typically tainis vadai. It's a tainis bari. It's now it calls it here tainis bari. Here it's tainis vadai. So suffix went on. So Tanya Rishem Yochai Oimer the Rashbi responds and says the following. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, the Rashbi, says, never shvua b'chutz or never shvua b'fnim. It says shvua b'chutz, and it's also a shvua in the inside, which is referring to the saita, because you have to actually make the shvua in the azara. Ma shvua hamora b'fnim. When it comes to the shvua, which is inside by the saita asabo savik kavadai, even though the whole notion of saita is a suffix, we consider it like a vada in the fact that we require shvua. So shvua hamora b'chutz asabo savik kavadai. We don't make any distinction, and therefore the din is that a shvua still needs to be made, even a gilgal shvua. Okay, let's hold off there for a second. Question 10, as we saw yesterday, but the second half, we see gilgal shvua from the Torah, from Saita, the case in Nilman Misham gilgal shvua mamamoin. So again, we went out of Kal V'chomer that when it comes to shvua Saita, one witness isn't acceptable, in other words, megaglin. So shvus mama and shenidna echad, one witness is acceptable. Then certainly in that situation, the din is that you would megaglin, that you actually do make a shvua. Okay, and that was also question TB 25, as we saw again half of it in yesterday's daf, and here we are today. All right, weiter. So now the Gemara poses a different question. Ad heichen gilgal shvua. How far do you go as far as gilgal shvua? So does that mean you could just make this person make a shvua about anything? There's got to be maybe some limits here. So Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Di'amrulei hishavali she'in avdi ata. Make a shvua that you're not my slave. Says Rashi, afilu zumagalglin. Even this we will allow for him to make a shvua. If he's already mechuyev to make a shvua, so then the din is that also when it comes to a slave. Hahu shamuti misham tinanle. So he said in that situation we would actually put this person to cherem. If you call someone a slave when they're not, then you should be excommunicated for being mazalzali Yisrael in such a way. So what do you mean that you can make a gilgal shvua like that? If you call someone a mamzer, sevus harboyim, we're going to give you malchus. That's actually kanas, a malchus mardus, because you can't do that. If you call someone a rasha, then yordim l'chayav. You could, says Rashi, koloimer l'zu in basiness kokin, of whom mutter l'sanaisa, you can hate the guy, nafal ma'it parnasasa, to minimize his livelihood, wearing mum nasai. Anyway, the point is, what do you mean that gilgal shvua you can see if the guy's an eved? He has to make a shvua. You don't have to call someone an eved. Elam Rava, he shavali shaloi nimcharteli ba'eved ivri. Make a shvua to me that you were not sold to me as an eved ivri. So hay tainas mal yasehi. What do you mean? This is a good tainam. A moina islay gabe. You shouldn't even need a gilgal. Rather, a regular shvua in that of itself should be sufficient. So what does that mean? You need a gilgal shvua. So Rava Tamed Yama Rava Evan Ivri Gufu Kanoi. When it comes to an Evan Ivri, which we haven't heard before, we knew this by an Evan Kanaini, but according to him, he holds that actually when it comes to an Evan Ivri, again, by the way, the key of Rashi, Hakari L'Chaver Evan means an Evan Kanani. If you call someone non-Jewish slave, that's that's a much higher level of wrongness. So the din is that when it comes to this situation, you said the din is an evid ivri's gufa kanai, so that you own him. So yihachi hainu karka. So then it should have the same status of land. In land we don't make a shvua. So ma'adatei a karka hudi avdi inshi dimizavdi b'tzina. When it comes to karka, the reason why we don't make a shvua in that situation, and we do allow gilgal, is because it's possible that there was a sale, but it was done in private. But since if there was a sale, maybe no one would know about it. However, because of this eved, there is a kol. So therefore, maybe you don't need to make a gilgal. Kamash Malon. So again, When it comes to land, it's possible it could have been sold privately, and therefore maybe no one knows about it, and therefore that's the reason why we allow Gilul Shmuel when it comes to Karka. However, Eved, even though an Eved has the same, if you're saying Gufa Kana, and therefore he's like Karka, but when it comes to an Eved, there is a Kol. And therefore, if in fact it was the case, we would have known about it, and therefore perhaps a Gilul Shmuel would not be allowed. No, even in that situation, a Gilul Shmuel will work. Question 11. Because again, karka can be sold a bit sinna privately, and therefore there may not be a kol. However, when it comes to an eved, it would be a kol, and therefore maybe in that situation we wouldn't do gilul shmuel and kamash shmuel. Let's see the next mission. Masnisin. Kol hanasa damim ba'acher, and we have to kind of flesh out the language of this Mishnah. So we're going to translate it a little bit according to Pshat in the Gemara. Kol nasa damim ba'acher. Anyone who is engaged in a transaction in which it is done with something of value, once this person acquires, let's say, even one coin, then the other person will be zoichet with chalipin. So let's look at Rashi. Kivan shezacha boy hamakne umoshach zuz echad min hakoina. See, the Rashi says that once you acquire a coin, b'toras kinyan chalipin neschayv hakoina bo'ensi chalipin. So now all of a sudden you're koinit. B'chol makam shem, no matter what it is. Imeso, let's say it died, or im nebdo got lost. So then it's already yours. So ketzad hichav shor b'para o chamor b'shor. So let's say they do chalipin. Again, the question is over here. It's not talking about a coin, but over here it's switching one animal for the other. Once one person takes that animal, the chayav zeh b'chalifa. So even though he didn't actually do mashicha on this chayfetz, nonetheless it's still owned. Says Rashi. Damim, even though it has like value, money is not what acquires. We actually have to pull the animal. But when you use a kinyan sudar, which is another way of saying chalipin, then it works. So Gemara says, 1 second. Chalipin, my nihu matbeya. So if we're talking about chalipin, and it sounds like they're using a coin, it sounds like you're using money in order to be able to do chalipin. Shema mina matbeya nasa chalipin. So it says Rashi, v'nan karmelin b'perak zahav and baba mitzia. It says in a relatively difficult parak over there, din matbeya nasa chalipin. You cannot use, of all things, to do a kinyan sudar of a kerchief. You're not allowed to use money. So this whole mission isn't real hard to understand. That you use damim. Kol hanasa damim ba'acher. Essentially, you're using money for chalipin. So this is how you read the Mishnah. Amar Yehuda Hachikamer. Kol hanishum damim ba'acher. Anything in which you want to evaluate the object and what needs something to be evaluated or assessed. Obviously, anything but money, because money doesn't need to be assessed. It's right there. So any object other than money can be used for chalipin, because it's called nishum domim ba'acher. So if you use any object other than money, when it comes to a transaction, as we continue Chav Chesam and Beis, once this person took, let's say, the handkerchief, this chai b'chalipin, the other person automatically is koina that other person's object. And now we can understand dekanami diktani. We understand the Mishnah, because the Mishnah doesn't talk about coins in the Sefer. Why doesn't it? If it's talking about coins, then why is it not giving that example in the Sefer of the Mishnah? Ketzad hichav shor b'par chamor b'shor shmami no. Says Rashi, v'ashminan detaris chalipin b'mataltalin. Now, when it comes to chalipin, to acquire a movable object, l'meimer di'afagav delisnehu kli el mataltalin ba'alma havi chalipin v'loi matbei asla shminan pum fakert. The Mishnah is telling you that you cannot use a coin. We're not disagreeing with the Gemara and Bamatzia. We're supporting it. And it's only something in which has the ability to be assessed or evaluated, which is anything but money can be used for chalipin. And then once that is done, then the other person is going to acquire it as well. Okay. So now that's the answer. But now the Gemara wants to understand the havimina, which usually we don't find this, but this is how the Gemara says this. L'may desalka tzalika daitin mikar demat ben nasa chalipin my ketzad. How is it shaykh that we even had the Havamina to think that the Reish is talking about money when the Seifa is not talking about money? The Ketzad, the Seifa, are talking about an exchange of things which are not money. So why would we even have the Havamina to think? So Halkamer, Peros Nami Avdi Chalipin. Maybe this is what's coming to tell you, says Rashi, that Tarti Asal Ashminan. It's coming to tell you two things. Nakan Bereisha Matbeya. First it mentions money in the ratio of Ahada Ashminan Sharmataltalin. And then it mentions other things. Ketzad, Hichlif Basar Shor Bapara, or Basar Chamor Bashor. That it may not be talking about an animal, but it could be talking about the value of the animal, which is its meat. So therefore, it's coming to tell you that it's inclusive, right? That peros, namely all movable objects, not just a kli, you can use chalipin with. So that's only good if you actually hold that that's true. It says Rashi, that's why it says basar shor. The kol sheken shor chai, certainly a living animal. The adif tfei, the dami lekli, shemishtamshin boy. So when it comes to an animal which is alive, you can use it for service, for work, for plowing. So it's more comparable to a kli. So the chiddush is that even if it's something which is not actually a kli, nonetheless, if it's peros, any movable object, not just a kli, can be used for chalipin. So if you actually hold that, he says it's not true. So yesh damim shein kechalipin, that there are certain circumstances in which it's like chalipin. Says Rashi, kul mastis and chadamilsa. Really, the whole mission is really one piece. We're talking about coins. Ketzad hichlif demei shor bepara. If you exchange the value of an ox for a cow, o demei chamor b'shor, and that's how you read it. Says Rashi, machalo shor b'mana. You're actually selling a shor for $100. Umashchay, and then you did mashich and you pulled it. V'schayev loizeh hamana. So then this person is chayev. Armel hamoicher yeshach par litin badamim. Do you have this para for this money? Yes. So shamalo b'mana. So they evaluated 100 obepras. So armel hamoicher hashor hari moish yato chayev lo nesunimacha bidameha mois lo kainim below mashiachas para kechalipin kechalipin the kalim. So let's say he owed $100. Then they later decided, instead of giving the money, give me your animal. Instead, this money was already owed the other person. Fine. So on this, there's kachalipin. So my time is Rabbi Yochanan devar Torah mois kainais. The truth is that money in itself, me'ikra hadin, works. You don't need to do mashiach, as we saw before. So matam mashiach kana. So why, if really me'ikra hadin, you could use money to be kain in objects, then why do we say only mashiach can be kain in metaltalin? Because as a din derabbanan, because we're concerned of the possibility that once you give over the money to buy something and you didn't actually get the object yet, and it's still in the reshus of that other person, of the seller, and then something is happening to this food or this grain, whatever it may be, that there's a fire, so he's not going to care because he already has his money, and as far as he's concerned, it's not his anymore, this object. And therefore, because of that, we say no. We require the buyer to actually do mashicha, and even though money was given, that's not enough. Even though minaraisa is enough, or minarabanan we're geyser. So if that's the case, that there's taka a situation that we don't allow it, right? That we don't allow money to be given. So then, how do I understand our case? So in this, he says the shchiach, mils the shchiach, something which is common, gaz rabban. The rabbanan make the gzera and say that you cannot use money to acquire something. You have to actually do a kinyan of mashicha. However, our Mishnah is coming to tell you the chiddush that mils the shchiach will gaz rabbanon. Then in this situation, this is a mils the shchiach. Says Rashi, shehi chayiv lo hadamim koidmachin, that he owed the $100 before, and then only afterwards they decide, instead of giving me back the money, give me your animal, right? So this money was already owed to the other person. So this is a case which is not shchiach. It's not a normal transaction, right? So instead of me saying, instead of you paying me $100, give me your ox, which is worth $100. So in that situation, we say that money will be koina because this is not a common situation. Even though the Rabbanan say that you must do Mashicha because of this Gezerah, but that's only a milsa which is Shliach. But this is a milsa lo Shliach, and therefore they're not geyser. So there's actually coming to tell you this Chiddush that in this situation you could actually use money to be koina. It doesn't mean we're talking about chalipin, but it looks like chalipin. But again, you can't use money. Hanicha says the Gemara like this. According to him, he says that it's not just money, but Mashicha is not just in the Rabbanon, it's actually in the Raisa. So Hanicha Yisrael Rav Sheshes. If he holds like Rav Sheshes, the Yomer Paris Navi Chalipin Mitaras Rav Sheshes. So we can say the Mishnah is like Rav Sheshes, and the whole Chiddush is that when it comes to Chalipin, you don't necessarily have to use a Kli. You could use something which is Peros, any movable object. So if he holds like him, so then that's how we can explain our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is talking about a case of Chalipin. El Isav Rav Nachman, the Yomer Paris Olavi Chalipin. If he holds that you cannot use Chalipin for Peros, you can't use Peros for Chalipin, so therefore, it's not a case of Chalipin, Umad Be'el Loikani, and he holds that really it's not you cannot use money min hatayra. So then moikula. So how is he establishing our Mishnah? Al kachak Rav Sheshes really. He must be holding like the sheet again. Rav Sheshes, then he holds that peros you could do chalipin. So this is another way of reading the Mishnah. Question 12. Be'eza kinyan is it's very generous. This question. Question 12. Be'eza kinyan niknin metalton midaraisa. Very nice. I mean, you could have asked, how do you understand this Mishnah? Is it talking about a kinyan chalipin? Is it a kinyan of mois? So the answer is either with money or with Mashicha. Okay, and that's it. Okay. Which is also the same question as TB 26. Let's see the next Mishnah. We're going to get to the next daf where there's going to be a lot of beautiful agadata. Masnisan. Rishus hagavaya, when it comes to the matters of things which are connected to Hashem, Gemara says the mois hektish. When it comes to monies of hektish, okay, rishus hagavoa bekesef, rishus hedit bechazaka. So let's look at Rashi. The Gemara mafarish the mois hektish koinos. That when it comes to hektish, it's koina with kesef. However, when it comes to something which is not hektish connected, like for Rishus HaHedjit is B'chazaka. As we said, when it comes to being kind of metaltalin, you have to do Mashicha. So that's what it's coming to tell us, that the din of Mashicha works when it comes to non-Kodesh mat things. However, when it comes to Hektish, it's even the transfer of money. And then we have this famous line, Amirasol Gavoya Kamisirasol Hedjit. When a person, Gemara's going to explain this, literally the words of hektish to the all high is comparable to actually giving over the head. It says the Gemara, talk about Ketzad Rishus Gavoya B'Kesef. What does that mean? So Gizber Shanas and Ma'is Behema. Let's say you have the treasurer of the Beis Hamikdash, and he gives money for an animal, which Rashi says is for a carbon seabor. It's not just for himself; it's for the Beis Hamikdash, for a carbon seabor. Let's say a carbon tamid or mashal. Shanas and Ma'is Behema. Now, feel behema b'seifa oilim. Even if that animal's on the other side of the world, kana, they're kind, which means because as long as he gave over money, so now Hektish owns that animal, even though Hektish did not actually pull that animal. The animal's in a different country. When it comes to Hedjit, a non-Hektish animal, you actually have to do Mashicha. Giving over the money is not enough, as we said, because it's a gezerah of Shema Nisrfu Chitecha Ba'aliyah. So in this Ketzad, how do I understand this? So this is what we see, that you do not actually need to do a Mashicha when it comes to Hektish. Ha'omer shor ze oila bayase Hektish. For example, if a person just says Amira, that I'm saying that this animal is going to be a carbon oila, my house is going to be Hektish, so just the Amira alone creates a reality now of a kinyan for Hektish. Behedit loikana, however, when it comes to something which is not Kodesh related, as we continue to Chavtas Amud Aleph, ad sheyimshech v'yachzik. You need to actually do Mashicha on a shore, or you have to do have a chazaka on the house, which is like karka. Okay, so now the Gemara explains this a little bit more. Mashchai b'mana. Let's say you did Mashicha, and at that time it was worth $100. Though hispik with daisai, but you weren't able to pay hektish yet, ad she'amad b'masayim, until it was worth 200. Now, again, according to hektish, it's not the Mashicha, it's the handing over the money. So in this situation, nois to Masayim. Obviously, in that situation, you have to give the $200, my timer, but not on a kesef kamoy, because when it comes to hektish, it's totally on the giving of the money. So therefore, even though you pulled it while it was 100, but we're not talking about hedger, we're talking about hektish. And hektish is not totally by Mashicha, it's totally by the sinus kesef. However, mashchal b'masayim, let's say, therefore, so how about the other way around? Let's say you did Mashicha with 200, it was worth 200, now it's only worth 100. So isn't the din that now it's only worth $100? So the din should be that I should only have to give the $100. No samasayim. You still have to give 200. So no matter what, when it comes to hektish, you always have to pay the more expensive amount. By time, it shouldn't be that hektish should lose out, because when it comes to hedgit, it's totally on the Mashicha. So since at the time of the Mashicha, you had to pay $200. It was worth 200. You had to pay 200. So when it comes to hektish, you should also have to pay 200. Pada b'masayim. Let's say you redeemed it for 200. But however, you didn't do Mashicha until now it's worth 100. So nice masayim. So in that situation, we again go by the more expensive one at the time of the pidyon. My time when us have a kesef kamoy, because that's how much that's the time you get the money. Pada b'mana, let's say you redeemed it for 100, and now it's worth 200, but when you did the money thing, that was only 100, so maybe you have to give 100. So Taka, that's the din. You only have to give 100 in that situation. So why do we say the same thing? That when it comes to hedgit, because at the time of the Mashicha, was 200, so therefore when it comes to hedgit, you have to pay 200. So then how come when it comes to hektish, why is it not, why do you have to pay 100? Why is it only 100? Or to what? Hedgit la b'misha parakoi. You don't think there's a din of misha para, the curse? Even a hedgit or hektish won't retract, even though by hedgit it's only when you do mashicha. So the point is that since if a person would retract on a deal, there's a concept called a misha para. There's a curse on that individual. And therefore, even though technically you can say, well, you gave the money, but you didn't actually do the mashicha, but again, there's still a din of misha para that a person is not going to back out at that point. We're going to stop here. Look at question 13. Mashach min hektish b'mana. So you did Mashicha on hektish at 100. Now technically Mashicha doesn't do anything. And now it's worth 200. Oh, shemasha b'masayim b'hispik l'fdaisu ad she'amad b'mana kamanais l'hektish madua. Very simple. So either way, you have to pay 200. When it comes to that, it was worth 200 when the money was given, then of course you pay that 200 because the pasuk says v'nasan hakes v'kamo. However, when it comes to the other way around, even though it's true that when you gave her the money, it was worth only 100, but in the time the Mashiach was 200. But when it comes to hektish, we don't care about the Mashiach. We look at the Nesinas Mois. So therefore, maybe you should have to do 200. 100. You should only have to do 100, not 200. So on this, we say Shlei Koyach Hedit Chamer Mehektish. We shouldn't say just because it's hektish that it should be less, and therefore you have to pay 200 in that situation as well. Adkam.